Opa Strauss Kirchheimer was born in Bad Salzschlirf, which is a resort town outside of Fulda in Hessen. She was 8 years old when she came with her mother and father in March of 1938. When they arrived in New York Harbor and got off the boat and saw the docks and the subway, my Opa, her father, said, "Kind, was für ein Saustall, Leute zu empfangen." What for pigsty to see here. I couldn't believe what the difference was between New York and Europe. And the next day, her parents went to apply for citizenship and then to night school to learn English. They lived up on St. Nicholas Avenue in Washington Heights. And one day, my Oma ran into an old friend of hers from Bad Salzschlirf out on Fifth Avenue. And he said to her, "Jenny, wenn die Leute von Bad Salzschlirf uns jetzt sehen könnten, du als Putzfrau und ich als Kellner, das ist nicht möglich." And they had a good laugh because that people would not believe he was a waiter and she was a cook. I just said she was that nobody would believe that she was now a Putzfrau, a cleaning woman, and he was a waiter. And she said to him, you know, Gott sei Dank, wir sind rausgekommen to America. Thank God we've come to America. Up in Washington Heights, they look forward to the Aufbau coming, the German paper, to going to Schiltz for Rollwurst, and to being with other Yekas. And I don't have as much about my mother because she was only 8 years old when she came, but I would like to read you one poem here. And this is called, "This is How My Opa Strauss Died." This is how my Opa Strauss died. He walked home from work in the blizzard of 47. My Oma opened the door. "Natan, why are you carrying groceries in this weather?" "I always bring you something, Jenny," he said, and collapsed in her arms. But the dying began long before, when he was forced to sell his butcher shop after Hitler came to power, when he saw his 6-year-old daughter beaten up by school children for refusing to say Heil Hitler, when he was forced to sell his beloved horses, his home, his land, when he was seasick on the SS Roosevelt for the 10 days it took to cross the Atlantic from Le Havre to New York City, when he stood on cold concrete warehouse floors as a night watchman in Harlem, when the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society got him a job as a farmer's helper in Connecticut, and he wouldn't tell the owner he had a heart condition, when he sat alone in a corner of the Greenhorn section of Shul each Shabbos, when he found out after the war he would never see any of his 9 brothers and sisters again, when he worked as a meat cutter through each heart attack, when he walked up Meadow Street and saw his neighbor 8 months pregnant, and she saw him carrying a bag of groceries, asked why he was out in such weather. He said, "I don't have long to live." And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about my father. My father, Julius Kirchheimer, was born in Niederstetten, a small village in Schwaben near Würzburg, and like your family, they're also an intermarriage. And on Kristallnacht, my father was arrested and sent to Dachau when he was 16 years old. And he came to New York on August 30th, 1939, right before the war broke out. He was sponsored by his Aunt Elsie and Uncle Harry. My father's Großvater, Abraham, did not want to pay the dowry, the Nedunya, for Elsie to come for her marriage, so he shipped her to America in 1910. And when my father came, he immediately looked for work and he begged Elsie to get a visa for her father. Abraham came to America in April 1940, and my father was still working to get his father, mother, older sister, and younger brother out of Germany. And a fun story that we always still talk about now is that my father's cousin came to America in 1936 and also lived with Aunt Elsie. And Elsie's son, Phil, wanted to impress his cousin with his German, and he said to her, "Ich du downtown in Dunkel," which was trying to say, "I'd like to take you downtown at night," but that was as close as he could get, and it's something that we still laugh about. And Elsie's daughter, Frida, called Großvater Großpa, and he was 85 when he came to New York, and he was a cattle dealer from a small village, and it was very hard for him to adjust to life on the Grand Concourse. And when he needed to cross the street, he would take his cane and hold it up like he was Moses and wait for cars to stop. And in that time, there was pretty much a shul almost on every block, and they all went to the Yekisha shul, except one Shabbos morning, they couldn't find Großpa. And they looked and looked, and finally they saw him coming out of the Reform shul. And the chazan there was Mario Brodashansky, who was very famous, and he had very long hair, so everybody called him Jesus. And Großpa came out after services, and they said, "What are you doing there? You're Orthodox. Why did you go? There's an organ there." So he said he went because he wanted to hear the orgela, and that my neshama es hat mir gut gefallen, that my soul enjoyed the service. And there was other family who also got out of Germany and went to Washington Heights, where they belonged to Breuers. And on Shabbos, they would always walk over to see Großpa. And I'd like to read another poem about, about life on the Grand Concourse. And this is called House of Cards. There was Cockeyed Newman, the widow Feingold, and Shana Dora. They played cards every day in Aunt Elsie's kitchen at 1266 Grand Concourse, arriving at exactly 4 in the afternoon. Uncle Harry and I would have to wait for supper until they finished playing. We finally got sick of having the card players in the kitchen, so we got a plan. We decided to get the widow Feingold married off. We put an ad in Der Tug, rich widow looking for husband. Louis the Gold Digger answered the ad, and a short time later they were married and moved to Florida, where he could spend all her money. That ended the game. Bob the Undertaker and his wife Fanny de Bumble lived upstairs. We called her that because she was round like a bumblebee. She was a yenta and had to know everything that went on in the building. Aunt Elsie knew everything, so de Bumble spent more time in her kitchen than in her own. De Bumble asked Aunt Elsie if she minded that I was living with them. And Elsie said she wasn't too happy I was there. Who needs it, she said. I didn't let on that I understood. Uncle Harry and Aunt Elsie helped me to learn English, helped me fill out affidavits for my family, and agreed to be sponsors. They listed the income from the boarders they took in on the affidavits, but didn't list the money Uncle Harry made from painting apartments. They thought the government would make them pay taxes. The government said they didn't make enough money to support 4 more people. One day, de Bumble and Aunt Elsie were talking about me, and de Bumble said, "I can see it in his eyes, he understands, he understands." Aunt Elsie told me she didn't see what all the fuss was about the visas. It couldn't be that bad. Everyone was afraid the Jews wouldn't return after World War I, and they all came back. And my father learned tool and die work at an Ort program in Berlin, trying to get a visa to Israel. And when he came here, he got a union card and went to work. And he didn't have time to go to night school, and he learned English by going to the movies. And I'd like to read you a poem about my father and his first job, and there's a tiny little swear word in it. And it's called Greenhorn. It was my first job, the American Automatic Venetian Blind Corporation of Brooklyn. $16 a week, a feeder or catcher, making blinds out of wood, taking slats off a pile, feeding them 2 at a time into a painting machine, or catching them as they came out and standing them up to dry. During lunch, the Italian guys taught me to play baseball in an empty lot. I got a hit, was rounding third, heading home, and they yelled, "Run, Googie, run like hell," and I did. They clapped me on the back. "You made it," but I didn't know what I had made. They thought my last name was Guggenheimer. They thought it sounded like Kirchheimer. They thought I was rich and asked why I needed to work with a name like that. After, we'd storm into Phil's, 10 cents for a sandwich and 5 cents for a bottle of Pepsi. There was only room for 10, but 30 of us piled in. Phil, an old guy from Poland, yelled, "Boyes, be quiet." And the Italians yelled back, "Oh, shut up, or we won't come in here anymore." The Italian guys danced on top of the tables. while the Jewish guys wondered who'd get laid off. I brought my own lunch, but treated myself to a Pepsi. I needed to save money, needed to show the government how much I had in the bank, so they would let me bring my family over. The Italian guys taught me when to run, when to stay, and how to keep score. They were so tough, so free. They didn't take shit from anybody. One guy invited me to go fishing Sunday afternoons. You come to my house in Canarsie, Googie. I'll introduce you to some girls. I never went. I didn't know how to get there from the Bronx and was too ashamed to ask. And after the war, my father found out that his family had been killed in Auschwitz, and life was not easy for them, but they persevered, like everyone here has said, and I'd like to just end with this last poem called Learning a New Language. My father is teaching me German. He still speaks fluently, even though he escaped from Nazi Germany almost 70 years ago when he was 17. We study nouns and verbs. We study when to use the formal pronouns sie, you, and when to use the more familiar du. One must be offered permission to use the familiar. We study dialects, the word ich, I. The Berliners pronounce it ich. Those from Frankfurt am Main, ich. Those from Schwaben, ich or I. He tells me when he was a kid, he and his friends used to say in a Berliner dialect, Berlin gewesen or Anje yessen and sie war so süß gewesen. I was in Berlin and ate an orange and it was very sweet. And then we added, dass mir die Brie die Gosch runtergelaufen ist, with the juices running down my mouth. He explains, it is in our Schwabish dialect. I should say it was our dialect. And so I think in the end they came to this country, to New York, and they did have to learn a new language and all its connotations. So thank you very much.